I'd ask if you're not speaking, if you could put yourself on mute, and that way we won't have much feedback, and we'll kick it off. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us this morning for the launch of Count Every Hero's Operation Protect Democracy. My name is Joe Plunzer. I'll be facilitating this roundtable today with Army veteran Marjorie Eastman. Last fall, under Count Every Hero, a nonpartisan effort, more than 70 well-known senior retired and former defense leaders rallied to bring national attention to military absentee voting to ensure service members' right to vote was protected and counted. Today, we're launching a new national awareness campaign on a new objective, which is electoral reform. So today, I'll introduce the co-chairs of this effort. Each will say a few words about why this effort is important, and then we'll open it to your questions. I know a few of you have a hard stop at 10:55, so we'll keep the show moving. And I'll also record this Zoom session if there's no objections. So are there any objections to me recording this? Okay, hearing none. I just wanted to mention who's in the room today. Our chair is a beloved figure in my personal military history, is a retired Marine Corps General Tony Zinni, former CENTCOM commander. General Zinni is joined by the following retired and former senior defense officials: the Honorable Louis Caldera, 17th Secretary of the Army; the Honorable Sean O'Keefe, 69th Secretary of the Navy; the Honorable Deborah Lee James, 23rd Secretary of the Air Force; General George Casey, who is not able to make it today, sends his regards, former Chief of Staff of the Army; Admiral Steve Abbott, former Deputy Commander-in-Chief of U.S. European Command; General John Jumper, former Chief of Staff of the Air Force; and Admiral James Loy, with U.S. Coast Guard, former Acting Secretary of Homeland Security. We're also joined by Damon Effingham, and Billy Gardner of our sponsoring organization represent us. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to General Zinni.
Thank you, Joe. As Joe mentioned, we were originally part of the Count Every Hero effort. And after that, we observed some disturbing and troubling events that occurred prior to the last election, during the election, and after the election that spurred us to take on this new effort, this Project Protect Democracy. These included the foreign attempts to influence our election, the influence of special interest groups and money groups, the creating of unfounded mistrust in our election processes, and the insurrection, of course, that took place on January 6th that seemed to bring it all to a head. The fact that veterans and active duty members participated in that was troubling for us. And then of late, the legislation that seems to be proliferating to try to restrict eligible voters in many ways and make it more difficult to vote. These things cumulatively really prompted us to say, let's keep this nonpartisan group together. We think we have an obligation based on our oath. And by the way, that oath gets misinterpreted and misrepresented by many groups and individuals that don't understand what support and defend the Constitution means. So we honestly felt the American people would look to us as former senior leaders in the military, both civilian and uniformed, to make sure that we're sending the right message and showing that we still honor that oath to support and defend that Constitution and make sure it's understood. So part of our effort is education. It's to muster as much of the leadership, especially veteran leadership, so again, civilian and military, to show that these things are a danger to our democracy and our democratic processes. Thank you again for joining us this morning. Turn it back to you, Joe.
Thank you, sir. And I'll turn it over to Secretary James. She'll say a few words.
Thank you. Well, I just want to associate myself with General Zinni's comments. I couldn't agree more. And I became involved with this organization for all of the same reasons that he enumerated. As he said, what started out as a group of us who are leaders from the military, both civilian and uniform, wanting to make sure that our military ballots and our military family ballots were counted during the maelstrom that we went through back in November, when mail-in ballots and flexibility in balloting was under attack. But it has since grown beyond that. January 6th certainly was a turning point for me. And it made me realize that the very foundations of democracy are under threat here. So I sat back and said to myself, you know, no American can do everything, but every single American can and should do something. And so that's where I come in with this expanded purpose and why I am all in this new campaign. So my something is to join with this renowned group of uniformed and civilian national security leaders. We all took an oath. We all continue to believe in that oath as Americans going forward. And we want to try to help do our part to restore faith in democracy, encourage participation, and safeguard the access for all eligible Americans to vote, not just our military, but everybody in flexible ways. And to say no to foreign influence in our elections once and for all, and to see to it that action takes place to make that a reality. So this campaign is focused on 6 principles, and I would just like to tell you those principles at this point. Number 1, secure elections free of foreign interference. Number 2, equal access to the polls should be available for all eligible voters. Number 3, we need accountability of our elected officials. Number 4, all American voters must be able to direct our country's future, not only the elite few. Number 5, we need transparency and effective oversight of the electoral system. And number 6, civic literacy needs to be built in this country so that we have an informed, engaged, and expanded electorate. And I look forward to working with my colleagues and others to try to help do our part to bring these principles into reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Secretary O'Keefe.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I'm persuaded to be a part of this particular endeavor just for a couple of fundamental reasons. The American experiment in democracy has been sustained for nearly 250 years, but it certainly isn't by any means guaranteed. It never has been since its start. It's in so many directions. It transcends, and its importance transcends partisanship of any variety. And so as a consequence, it really is dependent upon inclusive engagement and dependent on citizenship engagement. And that means access. That means the ability to access the polls, to participate, to be part of the public debate in a way that really can assure that this democracy remains vibrant and still exists. Because again, the emphasis on the experiment is truly the important feature that distinguishes what we are all about and who we are as Americans. That is not something that absolutely can be taken for granted. This is an effort to make sure, as Secretary James just went through on the 6 principles, that our best efforts are put towards assuring those 6 objectives in order to attain a continuation of this experiment. And I'm very privileged to be part of the endeavor. And I thank Chairman Zinni for recruiting us all to be part of this important going forward endeavor. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Secretary Caldera, please.
Thank you, Joe. And thank you, General Zinni, and all of my distinguished colleagues who are joining together in this effort. I think it's critical that we restore confidence in our democracy, confidence that was badly shaken throughout the last election because of allegations that the election was fraudulent, confidence that was shaken by the events of January 6th. And I think it's critical for all Americans, and that's part of what we're asking, is for veterans who took an oath to defend and support the Constitution, and all Americans to join us to restoring confidence in our elections through their active participation. We can't just sit on the sidelines anymore. We have to restore the sense that elections are determined based on the qualifications of the candidates, the ideas that they put forward, not because the rules were changed in order to discourage or create barriers for some people to be able to participate, or lines for electoral districts drawn to entrench parties or incumbents. We all have a stake in that. Part of the reason we have the polarization that we do in our nation today is because the rules for our elections were written by active political actors who wrote them to benefit themselves. And so we're calling for engagement of all Americans so that we can have an inclusive democracy where every eligible citizen is encouraged to register and participate. as fiercely contested as the last election was, a third of Americans who were eligible did not participate. We think we need their voice in our democracy. That's why we're calling for Americans to be involved and for supporting of federal and state measures that restore our democracy by making who our elected officials are the choice of voters, not the choice of lobbyists and special interests, not the choice of foreign governments who mount disinformation campaigns of the kind we saw in the last election. That's why we support the For the People Act that is before the Congress today. I would stress that we're a nonpartisan group. We have cross-partisan membership, but this is not a partisan issue. This is about supporting measures that actually have support on a bipartisan level among voters, things that they support that districting should be done by commissions and not by legislators, that they support stronger measures to keep foreign money out of our politics and to keep special interests from dominating legislative policy. So, there are aspects of this bill and any bill that any one of us might take issue with, but the point is that it restores confidence in our election and it puts the individual citizen at the center of making these decisions. And then once we've had, if we have free and fair elections, then we can restore that sense that whoever wins the presidency or retains control of the Congress or wins Congress, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, men, women, whatever their background, then we get behind them to try to make our country stronger by pursuing policies that we can debate, we can have differences about, but our elected representatives will be representing us and will be making decisions for that are to benefit the whole country, not just the few, not elections determined because the electoral rules were manipulated. So we think that part of what led to the polarization and we are today is that we need electoral reform. We need to confront corruption in politics. We need more transparency and accountability. We need measures that counter disinformation and the ability to manipulate people through the kinds of technologies that we have today, where who is behind these campaigns can be obscured. And as the Office of the Director of National Intelligence found, it's often foreign governments trying to manipulate Americans. So we believe that to strengthen and restore our democracy, we need an active and engaged citizenry, and we're stepping up to the plate once again, having taken this oath to support and defend the Constitution, to try to provide some of that leadership to work with other good government groups and citizen groups and individuals who are interested in making sure that our democracy remains strong and vibrant and is inclusive and encourages all citizens who are eligible to participate.
Thank you so much, Secretary Caldera. Admiral Lloyd? Oops, sir, you're on mute. There you go.
There we go. Sorry. I'll just reinforce, I think, a couple of points that have already been made and stress one or two. The notion of what those of us that have taken up this task have in common is service to the nation over a long period of time. Most of us have either 40 years plus in uniform or many opportunities to serve the country in a civilian capacity in one of the government agencies in one administration or another, Republican or Democratic. The notion of what we all watched occur and then come to a boiling point on January 6th is, I think, the driving influence behind those of us who have had those experiences now find our very, the legacy of our lives of service to this country threatened by influencers who would adjust these magic words that have always been part and parcel of our past. Words like "we the people," words like restoring faith and democracy, words that are right out of the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution itself. So the notion of that oath that has been mentioned several times already to support and defend the Constitution means that we, when prompted to do so, gather together like citizens in our country and have our voices heard with regard to what these important issues are that we feel are on the front burner, challenging and threatening the very well-being of our nation. So coming together to do that offers us a chance to reinforce these 6 points. And the one that I would reinforce for all of us and for our attention is the last one about building a civic literacy to build an informed, engaged, and expanded electorate. Whether that's the 8th grade civics course that we all took back when we were there, and wondering about what is being taught today in that 7th or 8th or 9th grade civics course that spurs young people to be conscious of, aware of, and potentially engaged with regard to themselves becoming a part of that expanded electorate down the road. And then for those of us who have been in a military uniform and have depended on the absentee ballot to be the voice by which, or the path by which we could express our vote on any given election across time, to find that challenged, to find the method notice associated with the accountability of elected officials, perhaps minimize access to the polls for all eligible voters is just totally counter to what we have spent our lives doing. So I'm honored to be part and parcel of this effort to join my colleagues across the board with regard to bringing to the public's attention these 6 very basic principles of our democracy, have them reinforced for our time today on watch, and leave them for our children and our grandchildren for tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Admiral General Jumper.
Right, thank you. And thanks to Tony Zinni and all the colleagues here in this meeting for your participation. It's an honor to be numbered among you. This is a hard act to follow, talking after all of these distinguished speakers, but let me just make a few points. Personally, for me, the events of January the 6th were totally unrecognizable to me as an American who was spent a career sworn to protect the very institution that these extremists were attempting to dismantle, and to do so before the whole world. We spent our careers, those of us on the screen, defending this Constitution and this way of government. The words of the Constitution say support and defend, and as been pointed out before, those of us who did a whole lot of defending, it's now our turn to do a whole lot of supporting. And that's why I'm a part of what's going on here. We are nonpartisan, and we were formed to ensure that the military votes were counted. And in doing so, we found that there were obstacles to military voting. And that's why I think we all support the kind of legislation that enables access rather than builds obstacles to all citizens' rights to vote. And we want to be a part of that. And as Admiral Loy said, I'm right with him when we need a return to civics. One of the other phrases that I always call on is the consent of the governed. The consent of the governed requires participation by citizens. We have proved over nearly 250 years now that our way of government intends to be self-correcting and self-healing. But that requires confidence and requires participation by a citizenry that is well-informed. And I think I look forward to participating in particular in that principle that we have listed as one of our 6. And then finally, as we approach the 250th anniversary of our nation, 2026, this, I think, is a group that is taking its first few steps as a new organization along a journey that can continue to hammer home the 6 principles that we espouse along this journey to the birthday and the foundation of the nation, and to renew ourselves in the principles that make this nation as great as it is. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you, sir. Admiral Abbott.
Joe, thanks very much. I'm grateful for what you and Marjorie and the Represent U.S. staff have done to help us put this together, and for General Zinni's leadership. And I certainly enjoy the opportunity that I get to spend with all of the co-chairs. And I'm like General Jumper. I'm not sure I can add anything to the substantial things that have already been said. So I'd actually like to tell you an anecdote, which is that I thought, since we were clearly going to emphasize the importance of civics education and knowledge of our democracy, that I ought to walk the walk. I picked up a biography of James Madison and have been enjoying that for the last couple of weeks. And I found, indeed, roots and sources for all of those 6 principles that we've put together. Clearly, in Madison's mind, as he almost single-handedly crafted the Constitution that was passed in 1789. And it wasn't perfect, as we all know, and he knew, but it needed to be carefully tended to. We needed to be vigilant because he was aware of the same threats, both offshore and onshore, that could occur to a democracy. And he built a very strong one for us, but we must take care of it because it can be threatened, and it has been threatened. And I think that we can make a difference. I'm very pleased that there's a recognition that both retirees and veterans indeed have a civic duty to participate in the political life of this country. There are some who believe that once you've left uniform, you ought not participate, that it's not appropriate. This group does not agree with that. And I'm on board to help us make this democracy work better.
Thank you so much, sir. And that's a great reminder, is that once we put down the sword and take off the uniform, it's our duty to be engaged citizens in our communities. I think one of the things that I wanted to touch on before we open it up to the questions from the press was the support of this group for the People Act. And General Zinni or Admiral Abbott, or any one of you like to take that on real quick before we move into the questions from the media?
You know, I would certainly be grateful for having a preliminary word, and I think that I would give the correct account of how we came to look at the For the People Act as a derivative event from our crafting of the principles on which we wanted to base this effort to protect democracy. We looked at the things that we had said needed to be assured in order to do so, and then what were the vehicles that were potentially under consideration. And in our collective view, the For the People Act, though it doesn't include necessarily every single thing that those on this panel would want to do, it included all of the major things. And we found that it was easy for us to say, we're behind it. It in fact supports the principles of Operation Protect Democracy.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. I'd like to, at this time, open up to the floor to questions from the press. So I know we're pushing up against a time boundary for some, but who would like to go first?
Hey, Joe, can I throw mine in before I run away here?
Please, Leo.
Just real quick, I'm not sure how this manifests itself. What does this look like? Is this going to be events? Is this going to be lobbying lawmakers? What exactly do you all have planned in terms of just how to advance these 6 points?
Yeah, no, you're right, Leo. It's going to be a nationwide awareness campaign. So it's going to be letters to members of Congress. It's going to be op-eds. It's going to be videos, social media campaign. kind of a D, all of the above solution.
If I could follow up on that, you know, it's great that there are all these voices on countering the voter restriction efforts that are underway, but what are y'all's plans to engage with some of these state governments that are putting those voter restriction elements in place? And a lot of this seems like-minded people talking to each other, believing in civics, et cetera. How do you get past what will likely occur, which is a perception that this is kind of a quote unquote liberal agenda to increase voter participation? How do you make sure you have that credibility with more conservative audiences in some of our red states?
Let me take that. I think one thing we want to do is expand this group. And you've heard several times the emphasis on nonpartisanship. So we are hoping that we will continue to bring in members that are from the entire spectrum. And we intend to go to the people through the ways Joe said, and we're just forming up, so we're looking for opportunities. And I think if you get the message to the people that these aren't liberal or conservative issues, these are fundamental first principles and constitutional issues. That's our approach. I think you're right that we will continue to be accused of moving in one direction or another, because all of these things tend to be heavily politicized in one way or another. And we're very conscious of that. And we will continue to try to make the points not based on politics or liberalism or conservatism, but on our first principles and the constitutional basis for what we're saying. It'll be tricky.
Oriana?
If I could,
Oh, go ahead.
If I could just add very briefly to that answer. So one of the things I think shocked a lot of Americans is how different our electoral rules are across the nation, in part because states are the ones who write those rules. But one of the things that For the People Act does is it sets some national standards, not in everything, but in certain kinds of things, such as how many days of early voting, the ability to use a no excuse absentee voting, making it easier for people to register, setting standards for access to voting places. Those kinds of things would address. Congress has the authority to write laws that set those kinds of national standards with respect to elections. And so this would be one way. That's why passage of that law is part of what is needed. And by the way, that law, there are things in there. I mean, Democrats have been as guilty of gerrymandering as Republicans have. And so not everybody loves this idea of taking the districting out of the hands of political actors, the legislature. And yet that can be a very important change. That means that elections are more competitive and they're more about ideas and less about just appealing to the narrow base that the district was drawn for. So we think some of this is both achieved through the For the People Act, but also that we are willing to speak to things in specific states and to identify individuals from veterans and service and good government backgrounds who will be allies in bringing that message locally.
Could I just pile on one brief moment here, Tara, to say that we discovered in Count Every Hero that, it truly was a national effort in the sense that veteran households, we're told, account for perhaps as many as 15% of the electorate. And so they're out there in every single state, those who wore the uniform just like we did or served in positions in government like we did. And we believe with the civic education effort that we're talking about and the desire of those individuals to be involved, not just on national issues, but also on the issues at the state level, that in fact we can have a substantial impact on what's going on in those individual states.
There are some 250 different laws at present that are either under consideration, a few have passed at the state level in 43 different states that in one way, shape, or form would somehow impact or limit people's ability, eligible voters' ability to vote. And that's just very, very worrisome. Back to your question, Tara, about why the military and some of what we intend to do. Well, the military, as a general proposition, is still, I think, the #1 most respected institution in America. And so I think many people are interested in the views of a group of people like we represent in Count Every Hero and Operation Protect Democracy. And like I said earlier, nobody can do everything, but everybody ought to do something. So this is something that we can do. We can engage in this conversation. We can help to educate. Ultimately, I would envision that we will write op-eds. I hope we'll have some outreach back to what the campaign will be about. I would hope that we would do some writing. I would hope that we'll have outreach to veterans. There may be commentary as we go by on some of these specific proposals. Back to the federal legislation that's been talked about, it would also require that 45 days for military and military families, that those mail-in ballots would have to be sent to them at least 45 days in advance. At present, the states regulate whether it's 14 days in advance or 30 days in advance. It's all over the map. And so that's been a problem for military. It just puts them under undue pressure. So why can't we regularize that? And so that's something that the For the People Act would do specifically for the military.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Secretary James. Oriana or Julia, did you have any questions?
Yeah, I had a real quick one. You know, some of you mentioned that veterans, even out of uniform, you know, really want to stay out of politics. So as you expand your campaigns, you know, how are you going to lobby some of your former coworkers, national security members, you know, to join this group or to join this campaign, and how they talk to the American people? Like, will I see some of you in Georgia trying to protest some of the infringement laws of what public citizens there believe are, you know, their rights are being infringed? I mean, just overall some efforts on how you're going to expand this.
Let me just give a try at that, if you don't mind. I think that all of us who wear the uniform and served as the people here in this meeting served, were so outraged on January the 6th that we're willing to, as Debbie James says, do something. Our colleagues are in all 50 states. Influential colleagues who are willing, I think, to participate because of this action that we saw, this disgrace to the nation, in ways that they may not have been before. And I think that at least the people I've talked to, I think we're going to see more willing to step up and take more action than they may have been inspired to do in the past.
Thank you, sir.
Oriana, if I could just add that we do have the experience of Count Every Hero, which started from scratch, but reached out to essentially the same cohort that we're trying to reach in this effort. And the response to Count Every Hero was very substantial from, you know, all ranks and rates and services and experiences, very senior people who had not previously been involved in anything that could be labeled as a political activity, but saw that as, in fact, a necessary task. And we believe we'll also see Operation Protect Democracy as a necessary task for those of us who've served.
Thanks, sir. And I'll just make a note that we've archived the fall campaign on our revised website, which is live now, Oriana, and you can see everyone from the most recent retired chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff all the way down signed on to that effort. There were more than 70 senior military and civilian defense officials on that. All former office holders or retired 4-stars.
Joe, this is Jim. If I could, I'd make one other point.
Yes, sir.
And that is the sort of the fluidity of military players in uniform. I don't know about everybody else on the call, but I'm living in my 25th house, bouncing around from state to state in various duty stations. And the Act also recognizes that and makes the registration process appropriately right for military players as they're going from place to place, whether that's overseas or whether it's from state to state here in the country. So this practical application is really another side of the For the People Act. It's not just the statements of principle, but it has practical realities attendant to it that are going to make the opportunity for military players to exercise their right to vote. And that's a fundamental part of being an American citizen.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Joe, if I can add, several of the questions are right on in that this is going to be difficult to keep apolitical. And because politics are so deeply interwoven in all the issues we talked about. But we want to come at this, as I said before, from first principles, from the Constitution. We'd like to take this, Steve Abbott mentioned Madison and his struggles, the Federalist Papers. We want to make this, if there is to be a debate, that the debate is about governance and not about political positions in some way. That's been difficult over our history. We recognize that. We're going to be accused of being political. We realize that. And people will come at this from political motivation mostly. And I think it's incumbent upon us not to fall into that trap, but to constantly emphasize the foundation from where we are bringing this. And that is based on the principles and democratic processes that our country was founded on.
Do you think the bulk of your lobbying efforts for now will be focused on the federal legislation, or do you anticipate going to talk to state governors and to, attorneys general and things like that to try and persuade the state legislatures?
Well, from my point of view, I would not limit ourselves to a federal approach because obviously much of what we're talking about here is the prerogative of the states too. And actually, we keep bringing up our Count Every Hero. We had such a variety of processes we had to look at, some of which were very restrictive. So I think we should not limit it and make it an either or, but be open to both approaches.
Absolutely. And Tara, we're already in some early discussions with different state level groups as well. So, it's as General Zinni's getting the band back together, we're kind of building this effort as we're going.
If I could just add one other point to this, and I think it also touches on your earlier question, Tara, of the objectives in all 43 states that have amended their election laws or attempting to at this point are driven by the proposition of either increasing or improving or assuring access and the proposition of maintaining the integrity of the electoral process. There's no reason why all those objectives can't coexist. And anything within the respective legislative initiatives in any state, whether it's federal or state oriented, that either limits the access or erodes the integrity of the electoral process is what will motivate us. And that's what is an extraordinary element, I think, of what has been assembled here, of folks that some of which were not politically active during this last campaign or did not want to take a vocal position during the course of the campaign for any individual candidate or any particular cause, except this one, which really does focus on, again, the very essence of what this democratic experiment is all about, is the ability to access and have confidence that you're accessing it with integrity on your voting right. That's something everybody can get behind, regardless of whether you want to express a political position or not.
Thank you, sir.
I'd like to really amplify that point from Secretary O'Keefe. And this discussion of politics has become a dirty word. Politics has become synonymous with viciousness and Republicans versus Democrats and so forth. But if we go back to the definition of politics, politics is all about the people. It's about how people come together to make decisions. It's evolved in a negative way with negative connotations, but it's within our power to reverse that if enough people come together and say enough. So if you look at many, many polls that have been taken of late, there is a lot of support for the type of principles that we are espousing. Again, who is against secure elections free of foreign influence? No one that I know of. Who doesn't believe that there ought to be equal access to the polls for everybody who's eligible to vote? Everybody can come around that principle, and so on. If you go down our 6 principles, I think there is very broad people support, public support. Just look to the polls. And so that is why, again, if every American does something, and we're doing this something, I think we can make a difference.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Tara, Oriana, do you have any following questions? Okay, I think we'll wrap it up. Margie, do you want to take us home?
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to thank all of our co-chairs today for just bringing your voices to this civics conversation. And thank you to the members of the press that joined us and who are going to help us elevate this important conversation that's timely and critical. I hope you've seen that this is a refreshing quality of this group, is that we are cross-partisan unity, and we have a unique quality in this initiative and supporting this topic of electoral reform, because we have trusted voices from the military who are operating off of shared principles. So with that, you have our contact information. We want to stay engaged with you. We will have more activities coming. Please continue to watch and follow us on the social media platforms and our website, counteveryhero.org. And again, thank you very much for being with us today.
Excellent. Thank you all, everyone. Tara, Oriana, thank you for sticking with us to the end. I appreciate it, and we'll send the recording around. The press release is going to go out following this this session here, so you've got it first. Thank you for showing up. And if you have any following questions, please email Marjorie and I, and we'll get them to the appropriate chair. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joe.